to talk about the maize probe. And there's a big story on the front page of the Standard. Maize probe targets top Rift aide and members of parliament. Page 1, the front page of the Standard. Grain scandal. PA of top Jubilee politician features in another graft probe, and you can see that story there. As well as several MPs in what is turning out to be a scandalous case of 2 billion Kenya shilling imports from Uganda and the sale to NCPB, which plan to import from the same country. And if you turn to the page 6 of the Standard, let me just briefly tell you what's happening here. At least 5 lawmakers, an aide to a top politician, senior government officials and businessmen are among 30 individuals being investigated in connection with a multi-million shilling scandal at the National Cereals and Produce Board. Prominent politicians from the Rift Valley are reportedly among 8 traders paid 1.9 billion Kenya shillings, which works out to 700 million Kenya shillings in profits for deliveries to the National Strategic Reserve that are believed to be cheap imports from Uganda. But at the very top, you can see a little sentence there. CS Kiunjuri said no money was lost, but poor farmers suffered. I'm not sure how that relates, whether that works with what we are reading here. We're also told that the police has, the president himself has received intel on this. He has been told of what is happening in this particular matter. Let me get reactions from each of my guests. I'll start from the other side of the table. Let me start with you, Steve, and get your thoughts.
Oiga, the thing is this. First of all, we need to understand why this is breaking now. Who is this that is breaking this information? Was it an investigative journalist? In which case now we can take that with appreciation. I think the moment we begin to interrogate the sources, it will give us a hint whether this crisis is being managed deliberately to divert attention from the real crooks. But be it as it may, if it is true that an aide of a top politician from Rift Valley is being investigated, then I can tell you, Ega, that those investigations are dead on arrival. Dead on arrival, because if government is organized around the philosophy of being co-option into the club of resource managers, then even the revelation about this corruption may in the end be a PR exercise just to tell the Kenyan people that we are doing something without making any significant movement. Because I have argued before, and I faulted Kiraiko Tobiko when he was director of DPP. He resigned with at least 1.5 years into his tenure, a constitutional office that within the intention of the Constitution should have served it to full term. When you resign midway to be appointed into government as CS, it shows that ideally in your operation, you are salivating for a change of position. People should have stayed firm. Now I'm really doubting the ability of this investigative agency to operate independently. Kenyans should also not, let's not pretend to be shocked, because standards keep on emerging. I think there's cynicism. There's a bit of people have said yes, deja vu. We've been there before. We know this how we are being governed. This shock reaction, I think, is the creation of the media. Kenyans are not necessarily shocked by corruption scandals, because every scandal that is emerging, investigations accompany those scandals. Either they are poorly done or not concluded, so there is no prosecution. If there is prosecution, there's a deliberate design to weaken it so that you blame the judiciary. Let me tell you, this judiciary is a very fearless judiciary. If you present incontrovertible evidence, they will convict. But if you present inconclusive evidence, then they will acquit. They will acquit. Part of the inconclusive evidence means they keep people that ought to have been there are not there. So I'm just cautioning that we may investigate, that's okay, but we must be told, first of all, who are the key sectoral players, because corruption in every sector involves the people who understand the intricacies around that area. Like now, the Agriculture Ministry, the key players, lawyers may not be involved there, but if there's corruption at the AG's office, you can be sure that the people who understand how that office works includes lawyers, and they're able to manipulate the system. Tell us every step of the way, who are these people, who was sleeping on the job, then we can map it out from there. Otherwise, these investigations, as you have said, may then just end up to be a PR exercise without any tangible, deliberate action. Very worrying. Honorable Halwale.
When I saw the emergence of the maize scandal, I became very alert. Because when you go to maize, and Kenya being an agricultural country, and given that the people who produce maize are usually the very poor farmers, I became alert for the reason that this could be a deliberate effort by interested parties knowing that the government is under focus for the loss of 9 billion shillings in NYS, to bring in another scandal in quotes, so that attention shifts from NYS to maize. Because when I follow it, and I see that the money they are talking about is 126 million, a tender was given to somebody who was not necessarily the lowest bidder, and the difference was 126 million. And they have given it the attention they are giving. Somebody might be deliberately shifting the attention of the country away from the bigger scandal of NYS to the maize scandal. There is also the possibility of people fixing each other.
Okay. Players.
Yes.
Working against each other.
People fixing each other with an eye on the political future of this country. I'm therefore not surprised that in the maize scandal, they are talking about members of parliament. They could be involved doing genuine business, or they could be involved in a scandal. What do I mean by genuine business?
I was about to ask you that.
Yes, what do I mean by genuine business? An old man in this country called Ndegwa led a commission in 70s, which passed, 1970s, which passed that public servants were free to do business with government. That was where the problem was started. Before then, public servants could not do business with government. So when you see a public servant like a member of parliament doing business...
And those recommendations have remained...
Up to date.
Up to date.
It's purely legal. So when you see a member of parliament doing business, it is actually legal. However, when the need arises, you want to fix somebody, like shift the attention of the country, then you just say a member of parliament, and you can actually call that member of parliament before a parliamentary committee, and when the public sees him, as far as they're concerned, he's a thief, it doesn't matter that he was doing the right thing and what have you. I want to believe that what we are seeing could be doctored. There's somebody who told me in the media, I will not tell you his name, that with 200,000, you can either buy a story, your story, to take a particular position in the paper, either on page 1 or page 3.
That is very worrying.
Or back page. You can pay. Or using the same amount of money, you can buy so that a story you don't like does not come up at all.
200,000 Kenya shillings.
Yes, that's what a journalist told me. But that was around 7 years ago. So maybe the price has gone high.
Inflation.
I have
another issue. Irungu, take us forward in this discussion.
So maybe 3 quick points. The first is that we must guard against anything that will contribute to the public fatigue and the disillusionment that the public has with public officers and the responsibilities of duty bearers. The primary focus of corruption is to create a situation of lawlessness and impunity. Part of that impunity is designed to get a society that is both comatose and cynical. And then they will stop caring. And I think one of the dangers that I've seen is that many of us are beginning to get fatigued and we're beginning to get disillusioned. That is the principal purpose of the corrupt and the people who operate with impunity. So I think we have to continue to experience or to express and experience a sense of outrage. My question is, why aren't we seeing farmers' associations putting tremendous pressure on the government to sort this out in the case of the cereals board? What we have learned is that 10 importers have now taken the money of probably about 4,000 farmers across this country. Why isn't there outrage? Why haven't we seen demonstrations and protests within the articles in our constitutions? Non-violent, responsible,
That's a good
and
question.
expressions of conscience from the cadets of National Youth Services. These are their jobs that are going, right? In these shady procurement deals, we are actually destroying what was essentially a very valuable public works program for this country, where we have many young people who are unemployed, both men and women. So my question is this, is when do we start creating the conditions upon which a government has no place to go in terms of corruption? Whether it be this cartel, that state officer with their state officer, or that cartel with their state officer, we need to create the conditions where actually the cartels have access to none of the state officers. And there is something that is missing. Government operates like a 14th century fortress or castle. Our current government in the 21st century is basically operating 7 centuries in a strategy that is 7 centuries old. Castles. Castles were designed, or fortresses were designed to protect the monarch. And the principal idea was you built a structure, fortified structure, to keep people out and manage them. You extract taxes from them, but you don't let them into the fortress or into the castle to express their views. Invariably, the corruption in the 14th century in Europe and other places was by lords and by household servants. Now tell me that this is no different from what we are seeing now.
It is.
The only way we can deal with this issue, the only way we can deal with this issue, it's a very simple thing, is to bring public conscience, activism, citizens into the center of governance so that you have a variety of sources coming through. One of my people, and you mentioned Keriako Tobiko. Actually, to be honest, personally, I'm very happy that he has moved to environment for one reason. The reason is that he moved in and he began to disrupt the cartels around logging. Now, I know it has disrupted a whole set of livelihoods and millions of people who are earning money from logging and charcoal and so on. So it comes with disruption. But the key thing there was that the Kenya Forestry Service, who we had mandated to protect our forests, not only were doing 2 things. One is that they had started parallel businesses, or protecting those who had businesses in logging in protected forests. It was damaging our forests, but in addition, some of the whistleblowers and some of the communities that lived in those forests, like the Sengwe or the Ogiek, found themselves being forcibly evicted from the forests so that you could have no eyes and ears in the forests. And I think for me, whereas I agree with the idea that, that it's important to protect the forests, I think it's also important to think about how are you bringing, for example, forest-dwelling communities into the forest conservation sector? How are you bringing farmers into the management of our strategic reserves? How are you bringing NYS cadets into the management of NYS mines?
They will be your eyes and ears.
That is the point. Those are your eyes and ears.
On the ground.
But they don't do that because it is a fortress mentality. The idea is manage the others aside and let us deal with ourselves.
My goodness. Steve, let's take a look at how other countries have handled graft. If you look at Rwanda, they implemented harsh laws which have been followed. A whiff, any smell of corruption around a civil servant, we are told, hounded out of office. If you look at China, the firing squad concept, I don't know to what extent it's been implemented, but it made headlines around the world. If you look at Singapore, they sent young promising students abroad for further studies, and when you come back, the deal is that for the next 5 years, you commit to civil service, and these are people that you can trust because they've gone through a particular system. What do you think in terms of solutions we should be looking at? And I'm very curious to hear your response to that law in the 1970s on public servants being able to do business with government and whether it's time to rethink that.
Yes. I think let me start with what Halwel was saying.
Great.
First of all, that raises what may be considered as an irreconcilable and insurmountable conflict of interest. And by common sense alone, that is disallowed. So if there is if there was the Gazette notice or whatever that allowed public officers to trade with government, let them know that their time has run out. Now that we are aware, I'm going to interrogate that legal notice, and then probably, if it's still in force, have it challenged in court.
Because, oh, okay. That's good to hear.
So that should be dealt with almost urgently. Now, all is not lost. Kenyans must understand how to innovate out of this crisis. One way of innovating out of this crisis is, first of all, understanding that because we are in a republic, a republican form of government is by its own nature porous. Government is porous. You'll always find people, good people there. There may be few, but you'll always find good people who are well-intentioned, who can get information out. Now, these are the people we need to create a safe environment for. No government can have 100% loyalists in the public service. Because government, in and of itself, is porous. Information will always flow out unless it's a dictatorship, an autocratic regime, where fear is the technique of governance. Then all the people who enter are the people who are already compliant. But in a republican form of government, even now, in as much as corruption in Kenya has deepened and widened, you'll be pleasantly surprised that there are people in government who are well-intentioned. Now, how do you create a safe environment? Safety requires with interrogating the existing law. There is the Witness Protection Act.
Yes.
How has it been applied? Have you been sensitized on how this law can protect you if you expose? You get. Then there is we have the Whistleblowers Bill. this law needs to be finalized because it provides safeguards, making sure that you will not be targeted for intimidation, you will not be targeted for sacking, you know, if you whistleblow. Once we create a safe environment, and then we trust that in government, there will be people who are good and decent, who care for their own reputation and integrity. These are the people that intermittently will always be releasing information. Then at the third level, we must then reintroduce faith in our key institutions of government.
And hope.
Yes, faith. You see,
and I think also
yes, faith and hope, yes. Because the thing is this, government cannot function without public trust. Because leadership itself is a function of trust. We have entrusted you with this critical office that you'll apply it not for your own personal aggrandizement, but to the benefit of the republic. Now, it is upon these key institutions of holders to reenact that faith, to renew the faith that Kenyans have in those offices, not in those office holders, in those offices. Once we have a critical linkage, like now we are reconstituting most of these commissions, the people that are applying for these jobs, I hope that during investigation they can be put to task. What is your organizing philosophy? Do you have a philosophy? Can you publicly state it so that we can document it? Later we can shame you with it. Is your philosophy that of public service, beneficial leadership, service delivery? Or you're just angling that I'm tired with working in the civil society, I think fundraising is crazy there. So you don't it's nice to be a commissioner because I'll have this, you know, I'll have access to. And Kenyans, we must also blame ourselves because sometimes when you're applying for these jobs, the things that go through our minds and our families when they know that we've landed these jobs, a traffic police officer is transferred the weighbridge, the family celebrates. Why? Someone is appointed CS, he goes for a homecoming. Why?
The whole village stands up.
What they are communicating is that now, having ascended into this position, rest assured that I will deal effectively with some of your problems, financial. Then so you see, that is the philosophy that we have in government, that it's a struggle for corruption. But if it's a struggle if it's a struggle for beneficial leadership, then we can create these linkages, map out these good and well-intentioned people, create a safe environment for them, reviewing the law, strengthening the law, then trusting that our key institutions of governance will be faithful to the mandate that they've been given.
You make it sound so easy, like child's play. But Honorable Walwala, is it that simple?
It is not very difficult because it boils down to just one thing, integrity. On the part of the people who are in positions of leadership, the way Council has said, that are you going into the office so as to steal and take a little bit of it to homecoming parties and creating weekend entertainment for villagers, or are you going in to perform? Let me give you an example. And Kenyans, you better tighten your seat belts.
Oh, really?
If you are feeling that this thing of NYS and the maize scandal is anything, the worst is yet to come.
My God.
The 350 billion that goes to devolved governments, if you were to allow the Auditor General just 10 minutes to read out to Kenyans, the amount of that money that is pilferaged, I mean, it is too much. When we created 47 heads of government in our counties, thank you very much, we devolved funds to follow those governments. But we didn't know that now we were devolving corruption. The amount of money being wasted at the level of county governments.
When you add it all up.
Yes, it is so much, and now it has moved from, and Kenyans, I speak with maximum authority, it has moved from wastage of the shareable revenue that the national government gives to the governors to a deliberate effort to pretend on the part of governors that I'm not collecting any revenue at source. So a governor will collect 100 million in a unit time and says that I collected only 15 million. Because there is no tool that forces him to declare all the money that he collected. It is pathetic, and we have to address it. Having pointed to the issue of governors, I don't want governors to start calling me as soon as I finish. Not all governors are bad. Take, for example, the case of the governor of Makueni, Professor Kivutha Kibwana. Excellent. When I was chairman of public accounts, his government came to my committee.
Yes.
Yes, they came. And you know, when they arrived, the man was being brought because he planted trees worth a few millions of shillings, and those trees died because of drought in Makueni. So I ended the audit query very quickly because he is not responsible for the drought.
It's not one of the 14 devolved functions.
Yeah. and his audit session was over. Yeah. And now when you follow him 6 years after the revolution, things are happening in Makueni.
Yeah.
He's delivering, he's producing his own milk, he's squeezing his own juice. I mean, that's where devolution is supposed to go. How I wish Professor Kivutha Kibwana will be allowed to play a different role after his term of office ends.
Now that's the big question.
Yes.
Who will, allowed by who?
By the voters.
By the voters.
Of the Republic of Kenya. Unfortunately, they don't follow poor people like Kivutha Kibwana. They follow billionaires.
They follow billionaires. Irungo.
So I think for me, the point is, I think it's an important point. First of all, Kenyans must continue to believe, and if I can be a bit controversial, to love state officers. Yes. To love them hard enough that when they mess up and steal our resources, we send them home.
That's love.
That is love.
Tough love. That is love.
Because it is only until we exercise that muscle publicly as a country that we will begin to see the country that we can be proud of. Cynicism does not produce anything but actually more corruption, right? So if there are people watching right now thinking, you know, we're doomed as a country, maybe I should just look to emigrate to America, well, America at the moment for Kenyans is a bit dangerous. Let's pick another country. But, you know, to other countries, I think the first thing is to say no. It is very important for us to stand up for a country that actually we can be proud of. And the actions are very simple, which is when we have cases of theft, regardless of which cartel or which state officer, we must condemn it, and we must give solidarity and hold up those who are whistleblowing. So in this moment, I think also we must recognize the role of the press, right? Because if we were not seeing those kind of headlines, this conversation would not be happening. The heads that are beginning to roll within government on this particular case of NYS would not have happened, right? So the media is very important, and that's why legal frameworks and policy actions by our government must be to create maximum room for responsible reporting on issues of corruption. If we do not do that, these 4 pillars, the budgets that will be attached to them will be meaningless. There will be no legacy for Jubilee at the end of this term, except one that will ensure that they are not re-elected.
That they're not re-elected. Even as we wrap up this discussion, gentlemen, I want us to take a look at the cartoons in the papers this morning, page 14 of the Standard, and coincidentally, both of them are about the governor of Nairobi, currently governing from Machakos. Let's start with page 14, and then we'll go to page 16. Page 14, someone is talking to Sonko. So in the first picture, you can't quite see who that is. And they're telling Sonko, I can see it. It is a conspiracy to remove you from office. And then a revelation is made of where Sonko is. He's consulting some sort of witch doctor. What's happening to me? And the witch doctor tells him that that conspiracy has been hatched by those who helped you to escape from prison and sold you fake certificates, your fellow cartels, and angry voters. And a little mouse. There's always a little mouse in these cartoons that sort of gives, I don't know what.
Is it a mouse or a rat?
A rat. Okay, I guess a rat. And the rat is saying the governor is consulting widely in this particular regard. And if you turn to page 16 of the same paper, Mike Sonko is there again, this time dressed in his traditional garb of bling bling. He's got a Chicago Bulls jersey, he's got a hat to the back, and that should be coming up on your screen. He's holding a cell phone, he's tweeting, he's texting, and, you know, everything. And he's in the mirror is American President Donald Trump. And Donald Trump is saying, you're cut from the same cloth, this is huge, in his American accent. So, showing that Mike Sonko seems to be borrowing a few lessons from the American president. Let me take 2 comments briefly. I don't know if anyone wants to comment on this. I know, Honorable Halwale, you had talked a little bit about impunity when it comes to governing from another county.
You know, I don't know whether it is the Americans or the British who say, but they say it in English, that the people get the leaders they deserve. I mean, in elective office, you don't elect yourself. So when the people choose to elect a particular character, that is the person they chose, so they deserve that person. The example of Donald Trump, very many of us, especially during the Obama time and during the time of Bill Clinton and other great American presidents, we believed that the institutions in the United States are so strong that you cannot force your way, muscle things for things to happen your way, that the institutions will control you, the systems. But after Trump came in, we realized that actually one individual can pull the United States out of a serious agreement like the Iran nuclear agreement and many other things.
The Paris climate deal, amongst others.
Yes. So this is a wake-up call to all of us who persuade people to vote for us and vote for others, that please persuade people to vote for people who are not going to visit you another Trump-like, Sonko-like effect.
A minute each. Go ahead, and then you get the last comment.
One is, first of all, just I don't want to belittle concerns around security of any human being, because I think we have seen too many of our Kenyans lose their lives in what are really mysterious and painful circumstances. So that aside. Next week, Kenya will celebrate 19 years birthday. And I would really hope that by then our governor has returned to govern from the county in which he was elected to govern. So that's the first thing, because a government in exile, is just not what we need at the moment. I don't think that Kenyans voted for Sonko on what we have seen in the last few months. We did not see a manifesto. I read the manifesto very carefully. It was very well written. There were two documents. There was a diagnostic paper that was written that said, what is the problem with Nairobi? Very well written. Nobody could disagree with it. The second one was a manifesto. That manifesto did not say, I'm going to run the county from Machakos. It did not say that I'm going to allow the roads to collapse. It did not say that the toilet, that the water and sanitation in the city will collapse. If it had done that, I suspect there may have been a different result in the elections. So I think we need to say, what did you promise? What did you promise during the elections? That's the basis on which you are voted in. That's what you have to develop. And that's what we need as a county.
Okay.
So that's the first thing. But I think just as a bit of a throwback, 100 years ago, there was a man called John Ainsworth who actually planted eucalyptus trees in Machakos. His dream was that the capital of Nairobi should be based in Machakos. And what is interesting is 100 years later, it actually has come to pass.
Steve, wrap it up for us and tell us why no Kenyan has moved to court yet to compel the governor to come back to Nairobi.
Sonko is governing based on borrowed capacity, because he stated it that he has no non-competence, but he will look for a competent deputy.
What do you mean he has no non-competence?
He stated that he needs a technocrat for a deputy governor. He stated. So he's a man of dubious capacity. He's governing based on borrowed competence and capacities.
Steve, those are your words, Steve, but keep going.
Those are Sonko's words.
You like them, huh?
Keep going. Those are Sonko's words,
Okay.
but the thing is, that is hardly surprising. So Kenyans can't act surprised, because he was relying on external support even to think, in terms of programming. And he has learned that governance is a very sophisticated enterprise, that you also need to make decisions that based on your own ability to apply your mind. Now, when you constantly, it happens all the time. Even for lawyers, if you rely on external support to draft pleadings, one day you'll be stuck. If you don't have that capacity. The second part, which is surprising, is this. People who voted for Sonko and the people who caused people to vote for Sonko believed that Sonko was manipulable because he lacked an established capacity to govern. They thought that Sonko would be easily manipulable, he would be directed, but Sonko has disrupted that notion. That while I recognize that I have known challenges, but I'm not going to be manipulated at will. So he's resisting this manipulation, throwing everything into a spin, making these people wonder, how do we deal with this? So there are concerns about decampaigning him in the public space. It's a very indecent approach, decampaigning him, delegitimizing his government. Talks are emerging about impeaching him. If this government has failed, the Nairobi County government has failed, we saw it coming. If there is a process of remedying the situation, it will not be achieved through decampaigning Sonko. What he needs to do is this. He needs to return to Nairobi because the law does not permit him to run public affairs from a private residence. That is also very consistent with lack of capacity. Maybe he's not aware that that is wrong. So he's been sensitized. Let him come back to Nairobi, run functions of county government within the official structures. The moment people start laughing and looking at it as a source of amusement, that you can move public office to a private residence, then you invite people there just because you have a palatial home, and then you're not shocked. That is the kind of governance that we don't want in this country. Yeah. Govern within the structures set out in the Constitution.
Okay.
Fight within those structures. Look for support. We have experts in this country. What is it that can be done? Listen, we have the Intergovernmental Relations Act that's supposed to develop a framework for support. If the national government has an established capacity to support county government of Nairobi, let them do so graciously, with humility, without humiliating Sonko.
Because that's what you see is happening.
That's what's happening. The thing is this country has not reached a level where Sonko should be impeached. I think we should create support structures around him to allow him to govern. You know what he did, which I applaud, is this.
That's your last
he
comment.
Appointed Dr. Miguna, a fierce critic. I think that is a signal that he's desperate for support. Miguna won't see the day of light, yes. But in lieu of Miguna, who else can we bring that can support him so that Sonko, if he's able to be managed, this government can survive 5 years with technocrats around him. But then in 2022, Kenyans should learn, Nairobians should learn that next time you elect a governor who is going to rely on external competencies, this is what we'll end up with, and he'll be doing a lot of firefighting and remedial measures. That is all I can say concerning
My goodness, Steve Ogola, I think you wrapped this up right well for us. Thank you so much, gentlemen.